Good morning, everyone. My name is Lisa Lyons. I'm the International Student Coordinator or Advisor at the ISC. Welcome to our tax information session for international students and scholars. I would like to introduce our guest speakers, Doug Kelley and Dr. Gill. Doug is a lecturer in SDSU's Charles Lamden School of Accountancy and is also the coordinator for SDSU's VITA program. Along with being a lecturer, he is currently serving in the U.S. Navy as the Assistant Officer in charge of Naval Information Force Reserve Region, Southwest. We also have Dr. Gill, who is an Associate Professor in the Charles Lamden School of Accountancy and the Director of Assessment. So welcome to both of you, and I will now turn it over to Doug.
Thanks, Lisa. It's of course my pleasure again to be here. Second year back teaching the Accounting 409 class, which is SDSU VITA. Took a 2-year layoff as the Navy sent me away to Washington, D.C. But prior to that, I did do the SDSU VITA site coordinator for 3 years. So 3 on, 2 off, second one back on, and I shouldn't have to leave again. So that's a good thing. During this presentation, Dr. Gill will be kind of in the chat room answering questions that anybody may have. I do ask for you to hold all of your voice questions until the end, but any questions you have, you can always put into the chat, and Dr. Gill will do his best to feverishly type answers as we go through the presentation. So I do have a presentation and I will share my screen so that you can see it. And once again, this presentation, this presentation is being recorded and the slides will also be available to you afterwards through the International Student Center. All right. So Dr. Gill, can I get a thumbs up if you can see my screen? Awesome. So today we're doing a tax workshop for foreign nationals, and we're going to talk about preparing our 2022 tax forms. Once again, Doug Kelley, as Lisa had mentioned, I am a guest lecturer within the Lamden School of Accountancy, and the only course I teach at this time is Accounting 409. So before we begin, filing taxes means submitting tax forms or a tax return to the appropriate government agencies. For us in this class, that's going to, or this presentation mainly mean the Internal Revenue Service for your federal tax return and the California Franchise Tax Board for your California state income tax return. You may be responsible for filing taxes every year, and there is a free tax preparation service available on campus for foreign nationals. And I've had many questions, and I set an auto response, so I didn't have to type the same thing numerous times. But you will be able to schedule appointments via Schedulista. You can go to the SDSU VITA website to find that link. But the appointments are not currently showing available, as I don't like to make them available until after we have this international student presentation. So after this presentation, I will work to make them available either today or tomorrow. With our first day being 18 February that we are open. So once again, just kind of check throughout the day today into tomorrow. You should see them by then. I don't have an exact time. One thing of note is last year we were open noon to 5. This year we will be open 11 to 4 on Saturdays. So all those appointments will be an hour earlier than they were last year. That's good for now. So what we're going to cover today, the free tax prep service on campus. It's known as VITA, or the Volunteer Income Tax Assistance. It's an IRS sponsored program. So VITA is not SDSU alone. It's IRS sponsored throughout the country. What's unique about SDSU is, to our knowledge, we are the only site that focuses on preparing foreign student returns, such as the ones many of you in this presentation will have. We'll also determine today how you can determine your federal tax residency status, what you need to file, how to fill out, and what to do with those completed forms. And then once again, at the end, we will we'll open up for a Q&A session. What's not covered today, we won't cover how to fill out Form 1040 NR and your California state income tax return. That's what VITA is for, and we'll assist you with those. Additionally, we will not cover Form 1040. So 1040 NR is a non-resident federal tax return. 1040 without any letters after it is the resident U.S. tax return. So we may be able to assist you with these, but only in rare situations. We'll talk more about that in later slides. So how do you use the free tax service on campus? So when you're looking at whether you're a resident or a non-resident, so on the left side is US citizens, permanent residents, and then resident aliens, and then potentially those that meet the substantial presence test. Those people would be considered what we call domestic VITA or residents. Once again, with us being the only location in San Diego area that focuses on international students and non-residents, we will not have any domestic VITA in 2023. If you're a resident, you can go to the IRS website, and there's probably 20 locations within 20 miles of San Diego State that residents can go and get their tax returns prepared by another organization that also has a VITA program. So on the right, non-resident aliens, and you had income in 2022, then you'll come to international VITA, and that's the only, once again, the only people that we are providing service to this year are those non-resident foreign students, such as many of you in the class in this presentation. So non-residents, you have two categories. You have Form 8843 only, right? So that is essentially just a reporting form to the IRS that says you are exempt. And you would use that if you had no income at all, or all of your income was exempt and you had no withholdings. For everyone else, if you had any sort of income, or you had withholdings and you have a need to file a tax return, then you will file Form 1040 NR as a non-resident. We do have a fixed number of returns that we can prepare at VITA, right? We're only open on Saturdays. There's about 7 Saturdays we're open, and we have approximately 5 appointment windows per appointment window hours, and then we can handle, X number of returns during those hours based on the number of students that we have in our class. Right, so probably around 40 or so returns every week that we can actually prepare. So 40 times 7, about 280 returns. I know that our demand or the demand is greater than that, but that's just what the bandwidth that we have at San Diego State. So that's why if you are a Form 8843 only, please do this form yourself, and we'll kind of walk through it later today. And if you're not sure, you can always email the VITA SDSU email. I would rather you not be unsure, take up a tax appointment, and then come in and that's all you are, because that's taking a spot from someone that may need an actual Form 1040 NR prepared. So what is VITA at SDSU? These are student volunteers. They're all students at San Diego State. They're enrolled in Accounting 409. That's the specific class schedule number, but in theory, it's the VITA program. The first 3 to 4 weeks of the semester, I am providing training to those students, and they get tested on, there's 5 tests basically they take through an IRS website. 2 are kind of intake interview type test, and then actual tax preparation test. They have a basic exam, an advanced exam, and then specific to SDSU, that foreign student tax preparation. They work for free and you pay nothing. So we ask that you be respectful and polite, and we will also be the same in return. If your return is complicated, you may have to go elsewhere. That determination is typically made by me, right? One of my students will think that, hey, I'm not sure if we can do this return. They'll call me over, and then I'll make that determination as the site coordinator as to whether or not we have the capability to prepare your return at San Diego State University VITA. I ask that once I kind of make that decision, you respect that decision. We've had people in the past that then argue, and really that doesn't do anything. I know what we can prepare at our site, and it just takes away, time that can be utilized helping other foreign students. What we'll prepare at VITA. So we will prepare the 1040 NR. Of note, you do include the 8843 with the 1040 NR. So, right, we have the 8843 only crowd, and then you have 1040 NR, which includes the 8843. Part of that, we will actually prepare the 8843 when it's combined with the actual tax return itself. And then we also prepare California 540 NRs. You may have to mail California in yourself. last year, we were able to electronically file 99% of returns, federal and California, but we don't really know for sure until we go live. I don't really see a problem doing federal, but sometimes we've had issues doing states. But federal 4 years ago, you couldn't e-file non-residents. In California 2 years ago, you couldn't e-file, right? So they are updating their technology and their capability to allow for those to electronically file. It's easy, more seamless, and quicker. If you have other states, like let's say you were in Michigan for half the year and then you come to California, right? VITA will not be able to prepare any type of Michigan income tax return if you had Michigan income. However, if you had an internship up at Amazon in Washington, Washington has no state income tax. So there's no preparation of a Washington state tax return needed. So we would be able to prepare your return. You need to book an appointment. That's our only availability is through appointments. And we ask that you prepare your client intake form as best as you can and bring all other required materials. If you go to the foreign student section of the SDSU VITA website, you can see the intake form and all other forms required. So if you need VITA, this is not an exhaustive list of everything. A lot of times when you get documents in the mail or you get a tax document, it says important tax documents enclosed, right? If you get one of those, scan it and you'll upload it to us via the Zoom session that you'll be in. And we'd rather you give it to us and not need it than to not give it to us and need it, right? Because that can cause problems later. So on our VITA website, you can get a blank 13614 NR. That's a non-resident intake sheet. It has kind of your basic information, name, address, date of birth, passport information. When did you come here? What type of visa you're on, date you left and entered the country, right? All that kind of intro information that we need to input as information on your return. And then like your W-2s and 1042Ss, those are going to have all the numbers we need for the tax return. Additionally, you must complete a consent to prepare virtually, right? So we're only virtual. That's similar to what we've done for the past 3 or 4 years. It started as a part of COVID, but I really don't see it going away because it actually makes us more efficient. Because if you forget a document, it's really hard for you to get an appointment to come back. Well, if you forget a document, you're at home on your computer, you can probably pull that document up that you forgot, or hey, your social security card is in a drawer somewhere and you didn't bring it with you, right? Those things are just much easier to gather if you're at home. So you'll need to complete that form 14446. It's also on our site. We filled in the information that we need to fill in, which is basically our process. And then you'll basically need to sign and date it. You must have a valid photo ID, such as your passport, for all individuals listed on your tax return. And most non-residents do not file jointly, right? Most of the clients that we have, especially those at San Diego State, are young foreign students that are single with no kids, right? So you just need to have your photo identification. Your social security card or your I-10 card, if that's what you have. Proof of tax resident status for you, your spouse, and all dependents, if applicable. That's cool. Kind of be answered as you're filling out the intake sheet. We'll see when you first came here, how many years you've been in the US, and that kind of helps us determine what your status is. So there's not going to be a document that you get from the IRS that says you're a resident, right? So no need to be on the lookout for one of those. Then some of the other stuff on the right-hand side, 1042S, W-2, 1099s, your bank routing and account number for direct deposit. I highly encourage everyone utilize direct deposit. It's the quickest way to get your tax refund, but we will need to know your routing and your account number. That's a number you can get from your bank. It's not your 16-digit card number on your bank card. A copy of last year's federal and state tax returns, if available. Those are nice to have as well, just in case there's some information on the last year's return that we need to include on this year's return. And then obviously any records to substantiate any other item that you wish to include on your tax return. For the most part, many of you in this presentation will have a W-2 and then possibly also a 1042S, and that's pretty much it. So how do we determine your tax residency status? So once again, we see our tree here on the left. We see who is part of the U.S. tax residence system. And then the right is a non-resident alien tax system. So residents for taxes are U.S. citizens, green card holders, and then that last one is present in the United States for a substantial number of days. also known as the substantial presence test. We'll talk more about that in a later slide. And the non-residents, if you didn't meet the substantial presence test, then you're considered a non-resident. So the testing for residency, U.S. government has a test based on the number of days present. Once again, that's called the substantial presence test. We'll have a couple of examples later on that. However, students and researchers, such as yourself that are on F1 or J1 visas, may be exempt from counting the days as part of that test, right? And we'll talk about that here in a minute. But essentially, even though you may have been in the U.S. for every day in 2022, you're still declared a non-resident alien because you're an exempt individual. So testing for residency status as a student. So am I exempt? So the first question that you need to answer is, are you temporarily in the U.S. as a student on an F, J, M, or Q visa? I've never seen an M or Q visa. We typically only see F or J. So are you here on an F1 or J1 visa as a student? Yes. Okay, question 2. Have you been in the U.S. for no more than 5 calendar years? Any one day during the year counts as a year, right? And it's not continuous. So if you were in the U.S. from 2009 to 2012, that takes up 4 of your 5 years that you're allowed to be exempt. If you're a yes to both of those, then you're exempt, right? So you are certainly a non-resident alien for the 2022 tax season, understanding that we are answering these questions based on the date December 31, 2022, right? So 2023 doesn't count. So if 2023 is your 6th year here, then when you file next year, you'll file as a resident. But this year, you'll still be considered a non-resident because 2023 doesn't count. So if you're a scholar, once again, testing if you're exempt. Are you temporarily in the U.S. as a teacher or trainee on a J1 visa and not also a full-time student, right? So you're here just as kind of like a research scholar on a J1 visa. Okay, I answer yes to that question. Have you been in the U.S. for no more than any part of 2 of the preceding 6 years? Once again, if you answered yes to both of those, then you are exempt. Once again, 2023 doesn't count. We're only analyzing 2022. Now, there are unique treaty circumstances to where if you are now going to meet and not be exempt in 2023, we may want to potentially file your 2022 return as a resident because of some unique treaties with countries such as Germany and Indian scholars. But for the most part, this is the general rule that we follow. So this is a decision tree on determining if you're an exempt individual. We kind of answered all of these already, right? And most of these, if you answer yes to a full-time student and you have not been in the U.S. for more than 5 calendar years, then you're going to go right to the middle there where it says you're an exempt individual for the substantial presence test. If you fail those questions and you make it to the bottom, you then must apply the substantial presence test. I've said substantial presence test about 7 times, so I am now going to show you what that is. So you're not exempt, so we're going to do the substantial presence test. This is based on how many days you were physically present in the U.S. There's a 2-part test. You have to have been present in the U.S. for at least 31 days in the current year. So in this example, 2022, and at least 183 days during the 3-year period based on that formula below. Every day in 2022 counts as a day. Every 3 days in 2021 counts as 1 day. And every 6 days in 2020 counts as 1 day. So then you do that equation, and then you add those days together. If it's greater than or equal to 183 days, then you are considered a resident alien. And once again, this only applies if you are not exempt as well, right? So that's the first test is, are you an exempt individual? If we answer that you are not exempt, then we move to the substantial presence test. All right, looking at some examples now. So immigration status, we have an F1 or J1 student. They arrived in the US on December 30th of 2018. This is their first visit to the US. The student was physically present in the US every semester since arriving. but left the US for 2 months during each summer. So we're going to look at the years, right? So first question, are they a student on an F or J visa? We answer yes. Have they been in the US for more than 5 calendar years? We have 2018 as year 1, and then 19 as year 2, 2020 as year 3, 2021 as year 4, and now 2022 is year 5, right? So this individual is still exempt. Therefore, none of those days in 2020, 2021, or 2022 count for that substantial presence test, right? They don't even have to do it because they're still an exempt individual. Now, in 2023 would be year 6, right? So when they file next year in 2024 for the 2023 tax season, they would then apply the substantial presence test and potentially be a resident. But for 2022, the year we care about right now, this student would be a non-resident because they are still an exempt individual. So another example, exempt individual, F1 or J1 student. They arrived in the US August 1st, 2021. The student was also in the US under an F1 visa from May 2009 to May 2012. They were physically present in the US since arriving, but they did leave for 60 days during the summer of 2022. So as I said before, it's not this 5 consecutive years, it's just 5 total years. So the first 4 years of the exempt status would be 2009 to 2012. They returned in 2021. So that's year 5. So 2022 would be considered their 6th year in the United States. Therefore, they're no longer an exempt individual. With that said, we must count those days in 2022. Right, those days in 2021 are still exempt, so they are not included in this test. So we're only counting those 305 days that they were present in the US during the year 2022. So 305 is greater than 31 days in the current year, and also greater than 183 days for the 3 total years, right? So this person, this student, would be considered a resident alien for tax purposes. So I am a non-resident, right? So now you've determined that you're a non-resident. What do I need to file? So most likely possibilities is you have no US income, you didn't work, you didn't receive a W-2, you have no taxable scholarships, and you didn't receive a 1042-S. All you need to do is file that form 8843 all by its lonesome. We'll talk about that later on how to do that and then where to mail that to as well. The second possibility, you have US income. You worked or had a taxable scholarship, were taxes withheld, then you probably want to file a tax return. If required to file, you can either try it on your own, utilizing Glacier or Sprint Tax are 2 of the softwares that you can use for non-residents. I believe those do have a cost associated to them. And my assumption is I believe one of them only does your federal return and doesn't do your state return, right? So you can get that federal compliance, but you still have the state compliance to take care of. The other thing you can do is come to VITA, schedule that appointment. So what is Form 8843? It's an information return to let the IRS know that, hey, I was an exempt individual. You must file if you're an exempt individual for substantial presence test purposes, even if you had no income, right? We're saying, hey, I'm exempt. These days don't count for me for the substantial presence test. So for F and J students, that's your first 5 calendar years. And for J non-students, it's 2 out of 6, 2 out of the preceding 6 calendar years as F or J students or J non-students. Your family members must also file if they were in the US under an F or J status in 2022. So those, if it's a family member, it's going to be either an F2 or a J2 visa. Now, we have seen examples where both, if you're married, right, both spouses were F1 students inside the United States, right? So then they would file as F1 students, not as F2. So the Form 8843 all by itself is a return that you can complete yourself, and I encourage you to do so. We'll cover how to do this later today. And as I stated before, VITA will not assist you if you only must file Form 8843. So Form 1040-NR, you are not required to file this form if you did not have any wages, and you have no other reasons to file, such as you have wages or scholarship income exempt by a tax treaty, or you had a taxable scholarship, or tax was withheld from your wages or scholarships. So how do I know if I need to file? So this is a 1042-S. If you are exempt by a tax treaty, then your employer should provide you with the 1042-S. You'll see that it's filled out in gross income. This is 2011. The form hasn't changed much over the past 10 or so years. If you are a student that's working on SDSU campus, SDSU is really good about issuing these properly. If you're working at like an internship or something else that's maybe not necessarily a university, then they may not fill out the 1042-S. Don't feel like that's a terribly bad thing. If you do receive a W-2 and you don't have the tax treaty applied with the 1042-S, and you do have tax treaty benefits that we can take advantage of, we can make those work within our software when we're preparing your return. Of note, Indian foreign students will not receive a 1042-S, right? Because there's no, in the India-US tax treaty, there is no exempt income amount that you're allowed to have. The nice benefit, probably even better than every other country, is that Indian foreign students get to take advantage of what's called the standard deduction. So essentially, they get their first $13,000 tax-free. So some other ones, you'll see that, did you have tax withheld from your wages or scholarships? You can see the W-2 here. Box 2 is where tax is withheld, or they display that federal income tax withheld. And then down in box 17, if you see the state information, that's where state income tax withheld is going to be as part of your state return. Then for the 1042-S, it's box 7 is where any federal income tax withheld is withheld for a 1042-S. So other forms you may have received, Form 1098-T, that's a tuition statement. Typically, you can disregard this because non-resident aliens cannot claim educational credits on their tax returns for the most part. Form 1099-INT, once again, you can potentially disregard that because typically, generally, non-resident aliens do not need to report their interest income. And others you may have received, Form 1099 miscellaneous or Form 1099 NEC. Those are important for us to know about and may need to be included when we are filling out your Form 1040 NR. All right, so next is 4. So we're gonna walk through how to fill out the Form 8843 and then what to do with those completed forms. So Form 1040 NR, VITA will complete these for you, and most can be e-filed. We hope that we can e-file all returns and then we provide you with electronic copy. So you don't actually have to go to the post office and mail your returns in, as it takes a lot longer to process. Should keep a copy of these documents for at least 4 years. That's the 8843, the 1040 NR, copy B of Form W-2, copy C of Form 1042-S, Form W-7, and then any attachments that you may have. We get this question a lot too with Form 8843. Somebody came to the US maybe September of 2021, didn't know that they had to file Form 8843. Go ahead and file it for 2020. If you didn't have any income, right, just go ahead and file it for 2021 with the 2021 form and the information from 2021. It doesn't hurt to go ahead and file it after the fact. It's due by June of the year, right? So 2021 was due in June of 2022. But there's not really a penalty for not doing it. Right, it's not like you had tax that you owed that the IRS is going to charge you any type of interest. So if you haven't filled it out in the past, it's a good idea to go ahead and fill it out. So for Form 1040 NR, once we e-file your return, you can check the status of your refund on the IRS website. You can go to irs.gov or you can just Google IRS, where's my refund? Just make sure that you're going to an IRS link. One point of emphasis here is the IRS will never send you an email about your tax return. If you're receiving emails about your tax return, that's going to be some phishing attempt to get information from you. They will always send a letter to the address on the last tax return. It's important for us to have a good address for you for that reason. If you receive an email from the IRS, do not click on any links and never provide any personal information. Once again, this is just a phishing attempt to get information from you. And those people that are doing it continue to do it because it works, right? People are falling prey to that, right? So if if an unscrupulous character has success in gaining personal information, they're going to continue doing it. So you can help put a stop to that. So for Form 8843, no U.S. income, but you're claiming that exemption from the substantial presence test. You can get blank forms and instructions at the IRS website. This is the link for the most current Form 8843. However, you can pull up previous year Form 8843s as well. So the 8843 is only 2 pages. So this is the 2021 form. Really, the only thing that changes is wherever you see a year, you just add 1 to that. So this year's form, like in part 1 under 4A, it's going to say 2022, 2021, and 2020. That's the only difference you're going to see on this form. So at the top, you put in your first and last name, and then you put in your social, and then you put in the address as well, but only if you're filling this form out by itself. So in this example, you are filling just this form out and mailing it in. That's where you put your address. Everyone's going to fill out part 1. And then part 2 is for those J1 non-students. And then part 3 is for F1 or J1 students. So most people in this presentation are going to fill out part 1 and part 3. And that's really it for the front page. If you are that teacher, trainee, or non-student, then you fill out part 1 and part 2. The back, you can skip part 4 and you can skip part 5. All you're going to do on the back is sign and date the 8843 if it's being filed by itself. So 8843 line by line, looking at part 1. So the type of US visa when you entered and the date, do not include tourist visas, just only when you're in F1 or J1 status. 1B is going to be your current non-immigrant status, so your current visa type in the date of change if your status has changed. So if you came as like a J1, but now you're an F1, right? That's where you would put that change. Of what country or countries were you a citizen during the tax year? That's your home country. What country or country issued you a passport? That's typically also your home country. You'll enter your passport number on 3B. And then 4A, once again, for the 2022 form, that'll be 2022, 2021, and 2020. You'll put in the actual number of days you were present in the US. Typically, our foreign students have a good idea of that, as I want to say it's the I-9, if I'm not mistaken, or I-94 actually shows kind of those dates you entered and left the US. And then 4B is just going to be the same thing that you put in 4A for 2022. So if you're a teacher or a trainee, you're going to fill out box 5 and box 6. And then you're going to enter the type of US visa you held during these years. Once again, those dates are going to be a year later, so 2016 all the way through 2021. And then you'll answer yes or no to question number 8. For most people in this presentation, you're a student, so you'll fill out part 3 along with that part 1. Enter the name and address and telephone number of the institution you attended during 2022, once again with the new form. And then essentially that number 10 is going to be the same, but you're also going to include the department chair or department advisor along with their phone number on box 10. You don't need to get their home address. You can use the San Diego State address if you're a San Diego State student. For box 11, you're going to enter the type of visa you held during the previous 6 years it shows there, 2016 through 2021. And then box 12, you mark yes or no to. And then box 13, you also mark yes or no to. Almost everyone's going to be a no. If you do mark yes on box 13, you'll explain what you've done to, in box 14 if you entered yes to box 13. And then the page 2, you're just going to sign and date. So some unique circumstances. I have an F2 or J2 trailing spouse. Do they file Form 8843? So if you're an exempt individual, then they also are probably an exempt individual. So they'll also file separate 8843s for each person. So you don't file a family 8843. Each person within that family must file one. I have a J2 dependent child that's 2 years old. Once again, yes, they must, and they need to sign Form 8843. It may not be pretty, but you can have them try to sign it. If not, then you can sign it for them. So for Form 8843, this form alone cannot be e-filed or faxed. If you're filing Form 8843 only, you'll sign a date on page 2, make a copy so that you have it, and then you'll mail it to the address listed there in Austin, Texas. The deadline is June 15th, but it's a relatively simple form to fill out, and you can fill it out at this time. Get it mailed out as soon as feasible so you can move it from your to-do list to your to-done list. Some of the resources that you can utilize to kind of answer some questions you might have are listed here. Once again, we at VITA will help you prepare an actual tax return. That would be the 1040 NR. If you are just an 8843, we ask that you fill that out on your own, and VITA will not assist with that. With that said, that's the end of my presentation. If you have questions, I ask that you raise your hand and not just blurt them out, because then we'll just talk